Hi everybody, this is Emily. I am a literary consultant, and I did a video a little bit ago going over the introduction pages, the first chapter of one of my novels. And here's another example of how to start out your novel. And in this case, for my shorter story, Alone for the Holidays, this was from my shorter stories or novelette series, Sweet Romance. And the beginning of this one is done more narrative style. And I talked in a couple of different videos on my channel here about some good ways to start out your novel, and I'll link those videos all below. And if you're wondering, this is for Alone for the Holidays. This is a black and white. Here's what it looks like on my digital and in print. This is the PDF is actually just for review copies that I send to people for review copies. So let's go past all the beginning pages here. Previews for some of my other stories. This is the one of the copies. So I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to discuss little bits as I read. And in all of my stories and books, I put these cute little quips at the beginning directly from me, the author. I write under the pen name Vivian Mayfair. These are all romantic comedy. So let's start here. Living alone was about as thrilling as watching your Christmas tree burst into flames. At least the Christmas tree would have the good sense to put itself out of its misery. Focus on the positive. Always the positive. Clara Neverov had learned how to live alone. She cooked her meals for one, stuck with a 4-pack of toilet paper, and stopped shaving her legs months ago. As a solitary writer and skilled brooder, her daily life remained simple. She could eat as much as she wanted without embarrassment. Laundry day came only every other week, hair washing once a week, and house cleaning once a month. True bliss. There were benefits to being a middle-aged divorced woman living solitarily in a country cottage in a snowy New England valley. The money was hers to do with as she pleased. She could drink mimosas for breakfast or eat peanut brittle crumbled on top of a hamburger for dinner. If the dishes didn't get done, nobody cared, and her trusty dog Snowbell would clean them for her. When a craving for refried beans hit, she could go to town, side effects and all. The best part of a hermit life was never having to share her Netflix and Hulu accounts. There was nothing worse than finding out that your man had been watching a movie where a woman's bare cleavage was mistaken for hand massagers. If she wanted to watch nauseating reruns of holiday movies until ex-husband hostility oozed out her ears, nobody would complain. Well, except Snowbell, who found her more entertaining than dirt. And that was saying something for a dog. Alone had its perks, just like Clara ran out of clean forks. So she took her first attempt at face planting and spaghetti, trying to get in the mode of writing a canine scene in her latest romance. A fun pastime. Yes, living alone after the love of your life kicked you to the curb like last season's Snow Queen costume was about as exuberant as watching America sink harder and faster than the Titanic. It was all good and fine at first glance, but was quickly replaced by a chilling reality that she only had a lower stateroom. Alone stunk. Ranger droppings would smell sweeter. Her latest self-help read, What to Do When Your Lech is a Wretch, suggested she spend an entire day focusing on the bright side of every dastardly situation. So now Alone was totally lemonade on a sunny day. Ugh. At least if she grew too forlorn, she could go to bed early and jingle her own bells. Another living the pathetic life tip for a loveless plus-size shadow of the Walking Dead. Snap out of it. This isn't helping. Isn't that what you wanted? Clara centered her mind, kicking through billowy piles of fresh snow to reach the storage shed. She wouldn't be alone for long, because a man was coming for Christmas, and there wasn't enough time to get everything ready. Huffing for air against a halo of frigid morning fog, she wrenched open the creaky door that dropped icicles from her effort. Onto her head. Kill me now. What has she gotten herself into? Only a dingbat with the empty heart of a lonely writer would have posed an invitation for a man to come stay with her over Christmas week. And not just any man, but a hunky stranger she met in a Goodreads book group that she'd never met once in her life. Okay, so let me stop here. We have a few pages of narrative because this scene, this is considered a novelette. There's only 2 main characters in the book. And we're introducing our heroine, our main female character. And, the story is about a romance writer who lives alone. So she's alone, and introducing her would require an alone or solitary scene. So you're going to have a lot of narrative. And since this is a romantic comedy, sweet romantic comedy, sort of like a Hallmark romantic comedy, and it's a shorter story, I had to combine a lot of aspects in the first few pages. The comedy, the sort of satire about her miserable life, a really creative way of thinking and imagination that she has, sort of a flair for the dramatic. I set a little bit of a scene for where she is, what her life is like, and then we're blending it with some action, right? She's going out to her shed to get something, and then we're getting into a little bit of what the plot is about. So if you're starting a scene just with narrative or with a single solo character, I usually recommend one of the many ways you can start a book scene is jumping in the middle of an action scene with something going on or with two characters. But it's a little trickier when you have a smaller piece of writing with only one or one to two characters. So this would be a good example of starting with narrative or with a solitary character. So let's just read a little bit more. And one thing that I do is I do make sure to introduce, you don't want a whole chapter of just narrative, so you have to get creative. If there's not going to be another person with her in the scene, in this case, I'll have her talking on the phone with a friend of hers about what's about to happen as I'm going to show you now. All right, let's go down. Here we go. Absurd, crazy, psychotic. She originally posed the invite immediately following his heartfelt email story about losing his wife to multiple sclerosis over Christmas the year before. It would be his first Christmas alone. 2 years prior, their daughter ran off to join the Peace Corps after a painful altercation with her father over a man. No word since. Now her book group boyfriend had nobody, much like Clara herself, which was likely the reason she made the gesture in the first place. She knew what it was like spending Christmas alone. It wasn't a fate she'd wish on anybody. Still, the invite was never meant to be serious. She had feelings for the man after 7 months of chats, emails, and group shares that quickly led to an online flirtation that bordered true love. For her, at least. At first, he laughed at her idea to come for the holidays, commenting on how pleasant the image was. A week went by and no contact from him. Then, out of the blue, she received an email that he was already on the way to meet her. For Christmas, egads. If she had any sense at all, she'd pack a bag and hop on a plane to Paris. Yet it was the time of year for goodwill and good tidings, the time of year when roasted goose garnished with parsley was served on platters, the season when Jack Frost nipped at your toes in your sleep, the holiday when mittens magically emerged in Christmas stockings. She couldn't turn him away. Flipping on the light in the crusty old storage shed, she groaned at the disaster of plastic bins filled to the ceiling. 3 days until his arrival. He made it clear that the only thing he wanted for Christmas was to experience what she posed as a spectacularly homemade Santa's Wonderland in a picturesque little country town. Who would help her decorate? 14 months since she moved to the charming artist community, and she still had no friends. She told herself that most authors were reclusive. The solitude was the very thing that allured her. If she wanted relationships with locals, she'd have stayed in Los Angeles married to a louse for a spouse. "You're insane, Clara," she said to the air. Tugging off her glove, she sneezed 3 times against dust and the dank smell of mildew. It had been a solid 4 years since she bothered to decorate for Christmas, thanks to her ex-buffoon who never managed to show up until it was long over. So much for that. Time to put on her big girl pants and get serious. She made a promise to a stranger that she had no business making. Now she had an even bigger problem that slipped her mind at this time of the invite. Her fake identity. How am I going to do this alone? She popped the lid off a bin that read Christmas books and ran her fingers over them. Dry, crisp, pretty, they remained unscathed despite years of storage. How was she supposed to have known the man would surprise her by saying that he was on his way to the valley to spend it with her? It was her fault for bragging about the 9-foot-tall Christmas tree, the gold and silver ornaments covered in glitter, the white lights that twinkled like stars over a manger, or the vintage record player that spun tunes from Burl Ives, her favorite. Whereas she described the perfect holiday to him from memory, it was her nature as a fiction writer to pose everything in the most glorious details to bring the scene to life for readers. To Finn Jacobs, freelance book editor from Manchester, New Hampshire, it worked. Somehow he interpreted, "If only you could spend it with me," as a real invitation to pack up and head right for her. Whoops, crisis alert. She lugged a bin of Christmas ornaments to the cement slab just outside the shed door. Time to pull her head from under the ground and get in the holiday spirit. She loved it once. Why not love it again? Her phone jingled from her coat pocket. Michelle again. Crackerjack. Her blonde bombshell friend, stay-at-home yoga mom and housewife of a pilot, much like Clara once was, had a real knack for calling at bad times. Clara tapped the button, stepping into the shed. "I seriously can't talk right now," she said firmly. "I read your email. Is this really happening?" So I'll stop here. So we go in this scene. The rest of the scene, she goes back and forth with her friend talking about how the disaster she got herself in, how she had a fake identity in her book group, and really liked this man in there who thought he didn't know she was a writer and thought she was someone else. And she even uses her roommate's name and picture in her Goodreads profile book group, so that he thinks she's like the friend she's talking to. She used her friend's photo and picture in her group. And so, because she didn't want anyone in the group to know she was really a famous writer, she wanted to pose herself as an everyday, like, newbie fledgling she used a fake name, a fake picture, and she looks nothing like that. She's really, like, overweight. She has dark black hair. She wears glasses. And yet she developed this connection with this guy in there she really likes. And she had sent him, like, a Thanksgiving card at one point, which mistakenly had her address on it. And it looks like he's headed out her way to meet her. And she's in this big pickle now, which is about what the rest of the story is all about. But since we have her alone, I do have her talking with her friend, as you can see by the quotes, for quite a while she's starting to decorate for Christmas, thinking about her situation, building plot, building suspense, leading up to what's going to happen. So I use the dialogue as a way to move the story forward. Here she's having some flashbacks, narrative in between about, her divorce, what got her to where she is, on and on. And still talking, blah, blah, blah. Then we get into, the first meeting. So I just wanted to show you, well, let me go forward. My short story only has, let me see, I think I might have gone into the new chapter. Yeah, she hops into her truck after the phone call to go down the country road in the snow to go into town. Okay. So she's in the truck, she's going along, she's plowing through the snow, headed toward town. She's kind of daydreaming about this predicament she's in and what she's going to do when this guy shows up, and realizes she looks completely different, has a different name than what she said. A blasting horn ripped into her thoughts of painful memories. Her truck had sped up, coming down the hill on a sheet of ice without her noticing, now headed for a black Charger stuck sideways in a drift of snow with its tail end blocking passage. The driver's side door was open with a man's jeaned leg sticking out. Crap. Clara instinctively slammed the brakes, which was not a brilliant idea with the snow. The truck kept on going in a slanted slide despite her attempts to stop it. She blasted the horn back, cranking down the window. "Get out of the way!" she yelled into the chill. "Move, move, move!" The man clambered from his car and waved his arms in the air. "Stop, stop! I can't stop! Press the emergency brake!" Like it was really that easy. Only someone outside New England would drive a sedan low to the ground in the middle of a thick winter. She pushed in her emergency brake. The wheels locked. When the car kept sliding, she tried to veer to the right toward a bend in the road to avoid him. The truck coasted into a side skid that splayed snow into the air and hit her face through the open window. "It's going to hit," she cried. The man dove headfirst into the snowy tree line as the truck made impact with the tail end of the sedan. It stopped the slide cold in its tracks with a boom loud enough to make her eardrums pop. Her hood wrenched open and emitted steam that she could hear sizzle and hiss through the vents. Air popped from her chest. Head spinning. So much for daydreaming about a man she never met. Real brilliant. She rubbed her head as her heart tumbled. A knock sounded on the passenger's side glass. "You alive in there?" Not with her luck, she wasn't. Maybe she was already in another dimension where divorced women in their late 30s were all skinny, the men honest, and authors were filthy rich. If only. He cranked open the opposite door. Holy nutcrackers! Precisely the way her head felt. "Your eyes are open, at least." He wrenched his way in, spreading both hands on the bench seat, examining every inch of her, the dash, the glass, like he'd been in one too many accidents. "Are you hurt?" he asked. When she didn't reply due to a throbbing head, he stretched into the car and shut off the engine, dropping the keys on the seat before squeezing her arm. "Pretty close call, eh?" "Great, now you'll sue me." "I'm not going to sue you. My car was stuck at the bottom of the hill in winter." "Your fancy car that I just destroyed." Rubbing out her face, she heard him depress her seatbelt button, feeling it release. "Nah, just a wrinkled up truck." "Right, so just my car's ruined. So much for the hooks. Whatever that means. Here, let me help you out." "But I'm not feeling well." "I wouldn't imagine so." She felt herself pulled out and put on her feet. Equally impressive arms with a doubly strong chest held her steady against the open door of her truck. When her knees wobbled, he enrobed a strong arm around her, which naturally planted her face against a buttery soft sweater. "You're in shock," he said, warm, buttery. "Makes two of us." "I may throw up." "You won't throw up." "You don't know that." "I do know that, because I hate vomit." Disoriented, she kept her cheek against his chest, not the worst thing in the world, considering how long it had been since a man held her. He rubbed her back a few times while struggling to extract his cell phone. "I'll call for help," he said. "I'm fine." "I'll feel better if a doctor looks at you. Besides, we need a tow truck." As the haze and daze of disorientation wore off, she realized the voice was subconsciously familiar. It soothed her in the same way a hot apple cider with whipped cream and caramel drizzle would. He groaned, "No signal out here." "I have a router back at my place. I'm just at the top of the hill at the end of the bramble bushes." "Guess we're walking, then." Setting her back, he dodged for his car, bent in, and pulled out his keys. When he turned around to get a final look at the mangled metal, she gasped. "Oh, no. It can't be, can it?" Her fingers splayed over her lips. "Problem is, if we pull my car forward, yours will slide into the ravine," he deduced. Staring right at her was the same rugged face, strong jaw, and clean-cut shave that she daydreamed over the past 7 months. The man of her dreams chose a fine day to make an appearance. With no notice. Again. Throw up a D, indeed, and soon. He held out a hand to her. "My name's Finn, by the way." "Yep, nothing good ever happened to Clara Neverov." The sky turned black around her as she collapsed in his arms. So that's how I end the chapter. But since this is a novelette, it has, I don't know, it might have, yes, this is a it has 4 parts, which is basically 4 long chapters. So the first chapter, the first half of it, which is really like a section, not a chapter, the first half of it, she was alone, and I introduced it with narrative, and her doing things that are pertinent to the plot, engaging with someone on the phone, which was a good way to bring in some narrative about what the situation was and building plot and suspense of what's going to happen. Then she leaves, and then she crashes into this guy who turns out to be him, and she didn't think he was even going to show that day. She thought she had a few more days, and then I kind of ended the chapter on some suspense, and now she hadn't even figured out what she was going to do yet. So I just want to show you with this example, and I wrote this short story, or this mini novelette, by the way, in 3 days. And I included in the back some family recipes. This was like a little holiday mini novelette, sweet romance, and I included some family recipes in the back. But it was tricky, it challenged me because it wasn't full of tons of different characters like some of my other books. And so I just wanted you to see there are ways to start your books and vary them up. You can start, like I said, with just narrative blended with a little bit of action with a single character. You can have your character engaging with someone on a computer, on a speakerphone, or through a window. And you can even start, with 2 characters going back and forth in some kind of an action scene, on and on. There's many different ways to start your novel, but this was just one other example. Okay, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If so, let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer them. Thanks for listening.